My question has to do with what you do if you don't fall into any category. So that you are a new kind of thing that hasn't been there before. So just to be specific, we are a socially and environmentally responsible business school. So we are not really, and since our students outnumber our alumni, the typical alumni funding plan is probably not going to work. In fact, our students give us as much in philanthropic contribution as our alumni do. So, and we've always been focused on individual donors because they don't have categories in the same way that foundations do or other sources. Is there a way out of this trap?
Are there any other questions? So I don't want to in any way pretend that the work we've done and that our research has all the answers, right? So fundamentally, I don't know is the answer, but I think that I guess the sort of the guideposts I would advise are, one is that, and I don't know what your budget is, but at
$5 million.
$5 million. So it is certainly possible at that size to get a collection of board members that are individuals, foundations, corporations, in which you are accessing funds because they are inspired by a particular and unique vision and maybe things they've never thought of. The key there, though, is that if something doesn't already connect to a person's life inherently, if you are, in some sense, both convincing them of the importance of what you do and giving them the way to act on that importance, it needs deep, deep involvement in the actual activity itself. That's why board members are often so significant. So if someone becomes a board member, is a board member with an organization for years, they know what it is. They develop that deep connection and then are willing to act on it. Harvard University doesn't have to worry about that because people spent 4 years on campus, so the connection, is there. Or Susan G. Komen, again, with the breast cancer, people have a deep connection to it already. So if it's not something that people already feel in their life, you have to find a way to make that connection. And so, again, at a certain size, organizations can do that. And the reason, by the way, for the size limit has to do with the number of people, or we believe it has to do with the number of people with whom you can foster that connection. So a board can have 20 people and have them all feel deeply engaged and participating in the thinking. But it can't really have, well, now I'm sitting here in this room. I was going to say 200, but it is very hard. It is very hard to get 200 people to feel deeply engaged unless somehow the work itself creates opportunities for volunteerism and engagement. So Habitat for Humanity is a very interesting example of an organization that's almost entirely funded by individuals, is working for disadvantaged communities, and is one of the few standouts. And that's because in the model is the activity itself creates that deep personal understanding. Most organizations doing something novel or different have to put people on their boards or advisory committees. And so then, at least in any locale, there's a limit to how big they can get. What you then see is that some of the more innovative organizations go into multiple geographies, and in each geography build their own board. But if you take a look at the multi-geography organizations, whether it's Teach for America or others, there's a cap, effectively a cap to their size in each geography. The number of single regions that get north of 5 million are very few and far between. If you add up Boys and Girls Clubs, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Teach for America, all of them, you can count on one hand the number of $10 million locations, and on your hands and feet the number of $5 million locations. Because again, there's just this, there's this inherent number of people that can be deeply involved in any one place.
Three of you have arrived late. You've been noted regarding this. I just want you guys to know that. Let me ask a question. I'll go back out. A lot of what you talk about seems to scream for the notion of leverage, right? Is that correct? How does an organization find that leverage? How do you find partnerships? Is that part of the equation?
I think it is. Certainly in our conversations with funders, leverage and exit are two of the most universally desired things. And this gets to a question of what is investment versus what is ongoing funding. And it certainly seems that everyone would like to be the investor and not the ongoing funder. And then obviously that.
What's the difference?
So any organization has activities that it needs to fund year in and year out, and it needs money. And for that, you simply need ongoing funding. And the leverage that I guess you would get in that situation would be simply the value of the impact that's created. There are then funders that want to be what I would characterize as investors, who want to put money in for a defined period of time, have to be greatly leveraged, exit, and in fact have other sources of funding pay on an ongoing basis. A lot of the capacity building is about that. Can we invest for a defined period of time? The organization gets stronger, the organization gets bigger, and then it doesn't need us any longer. And one of the sort of dirty little secrets or games of the nonprofit world is that often nonprofits are selling investments, and they're just selling them year after year after year after year, and that is in fact the ongoing funding. Everybody thinks they're investing, and it creates complications. People want seats on the board. They think that they have that they are equity. They're acting like equity holders. So the lack of distinction is important. Clara Miller and George Oberholzer at the Nonprofit Finance Fund have written wonderfully about some of these distinctions and how great it would be to change our accounting system to make them appear. But I actually think that that for institutional philanthropy and for high net worth individuals, the appropriate role is the investor role. That those two categories of funding, and it depends exactly on how you define high net worth individual, account for somewhere between 5 and 10% of funding in the nonprofit sector. So in some sense, there would be hubris for wealthy individuals and foundations to believe that they could, underwrite the activities of the sector forever. The appropriate role would be investment. The discipline that has to come with investment, though, is a notion of you can't, unless there actually is another funding plan